What's up, guys? It's Rob here, and we need to talk about SPRT because this thing is actually taking a bit of a dip today, and there is an insane statistic that I need to point out to you guys. So let's take a look at the chart first of all. You can see that we're down about 5%, just hitting this $20 resistance level that or rather support level that we have acted on in the past, right? You see over here, we've hit this a couple of times and bounced below, but haven't been able to sustain a drop below it. Now, we'll see if we can today. Obviously, institutions are really trying to push this thing down because they are actually potentially in a lot of danger and they are taking massive risks on this stock. And it makes absolutely no sense to me, the size of the risks that they're taking. We're about to look at that data in a second because they must really need to push this thing down. The risks that they're taking are absolutely insane. And if you actually look at Ortex, you can see that the current short interest percent of the free float is 94% today. That's the highest I've ever seen it. Even today, we're up 3.69%. 3.69% of the shares have been shorted. And I mean, this is absolutely insane to see a 94% short interest on the free float. That's absolutely crazy. That's just so mind-boggling. Why institutions would be perpetually shorting this thing, right? You can actually look, this yellow line is the short interest of the free float, and you can see that we are just making all-time highs again and again. We just keep pumping up, and institutions obviously really want this stock to go down, right? They are getting very nervous that if this thing pumps, there is going to be a massive risk to them because they've shorted almost 100% of the free float. So it would be extremely difficult for them to regain all of those shares and actually return them to the people that they have borrowed those shares from. So if you look, you can see that 8.79 million shares is the current short interest. Now, if you multiply that by the stock price, that's about $170 million worth of shares have been shorted. And that's one of the reasons why I think these organizations and these institutions are being so bold about this, because it's not actually that large of a dollar amount. And so maybe when they're making these decisions, they're looking at it and they're saying, hey, it's only $170 million total, right? And that's if one institution is shorting this thing. If it's probably split between many institutions, they're probably only taking like a $10 to $50 million short position each. Now, that is still extremely dangerous because the overall short interest on the free float is so high that if this thing ends up blowing up and those institutions end up getting margin called, it could be extremely difficult for them to regain those shares and actually take them back from people who have bought and are hodling them, right? People who are buying these shares with the intent to hold this thing to incredibly high prices. I mean, some people, it really depends on how many people are willing to let go of their shares and at what price, because if these institutions get margin called, they will have to reclaim those shares at whatever price they can. And if people are not willing to sell until $100, if they put in limit sell orders at $100, then that's the price that those institutions are going to have to pay. Now, obviously, there are a bunch of people who will be letting go of their shares long before then. Even if we hit $30 or $40, a lot of people are going to be letting go of their shares. But what's so compelling is that this is such a massive percentage of the free float that if institutions ended up having to cover, and obviously not all of them will have to cover at the exact same moment, that we could really see a massive run up in the price. Now, there is a key date by which I think we kind of need to see this happen by, because as I talked about before, the current short interest is only 8.79 million shares. And that does, if you multiply it by the stock price, only equate to around $170 million. Now, this is very important for SPRT because that's not actually that large of an amount of money to have shorted. Now, that means that it's going to be difficult to get those institutions to have to be issued margin calls. And if they're not issued margin calls, then they're very unlikely, in my opinion, to close those short positions because they don't want to take a massive loss on this thing if they don't have to. They would rather wait for investors to lose interest in this stock and to just continue selling it off and for this thing to fade away. Now, there is actually some evidence that that is starting to happen. If you look at SPRT over the past week, this is a 7-day chart of SPRT on Google Trends, and you can actually see that, we used to have some significant growing interest last week at least, and we were making higher highs on these charts most days. Now, today, we've actually made a lower high, right? We haven't gotten as high at the peak of interest right around here, and we are starting to decline. So this is not the best news for SPRT, and this is likely going along with, a lot of people are getting scared. This thing's down about 6% today, and they're looking at some losses that they may have incurred when they bought this thing around $20, $30, maybe even $40. and they aren't really happy with that choice. They're maybe thinking about exiting because they don't think the squeeze is going to happen. They think the market is too corrupt, and that even though the current short interest is 94%, they may not be making a profit on this because institutions might manipulate it to the extent that it just ends up fading away into nothing, and then those institutions would profit. Now, what I mentioned before about September 17th, why that's such an important date, is because that's actually the day that a potential catalyst could be occurring on, which would lead to a big rise in the price of this stock. Now, if you look at the options chain for this, September 17th as the strike date, you see that there are very many open interest call options. Quite a few actually are already in the money, and even more are out of the money. Now, if there is enough momentum behind this stock, if enough people on Reddit and Wall Street Bets and just the internet in general are buying this thing and raising the price artificially, right? Not based off of a fundamental reason. If they're just raising the price with the intent of gamma squeezing this, the gamma squeeze could actually occur much before a short squeeze, because gamma squeezes occur regardless of if institutions get margin called or not. Gamma squeezes occur because institutions have sold call options, and they then have an obligation to the holders of those call options to exchange those call options for a certain number of shares at a certain price on the strike date. So September 17th is this strike date, and there are quite a few open interest call options. Now, that means that if we can get this price running up even more, institutions will have to start buying shares to cover their position on these open interest call options. They'll have to start buying shares up and handing them over to investors who are holding the call options on this strike date when these options actually expire. So that could lead to a big run up in the stock price, which is actually what we would really need to see a short squeeze on this. Because as we talked about before, the float, the current short interest is only 8.79 million, and that equates to about $170 million worth of short position. So that's not actually that large. Institutions probably won't get margin called on that until it reaches a much higher price. So we're really going to need to see either some massive new interest in SPRT. Maybe a new institution that isn't shorting it would have to decide that they want to squeeze those other institutions out of their short position and enter in a massive way. A big whale might have to come in, or we could see a gamma squeeze pushing this thing up. There are a couple different options, but at the end of the day, if we want to see a big short squeeze, we're going to need this stock price to run up quite a bit to actually increase the value of those short positions that they have to a point where they do get margin called, because everyone knows institutions have a ton of money, and $170 million, even to one institution, isn't that much of their total, depending on which institution it is, right? Obviously, that is split up between many institutions, so we'll really have to get this thing running up if we want to see some gains. And what's unfortunate is that obviously, a lot of people are going to be selling this thing if they see some profits because they have been discouraged by by the institutions that have been shorting this, that have been pushing it down. That's somewhat unfortunate because a lot of people are kind of looking at this in a glum way, right? They were buying around 30, 40, maybe even $50 or $60, and now they're down around 20. They're very upset with the trade, and they might want to be exiting if they see a big pump up because they don't believe in the stock long term anymore. They've been dissuaded from thinking that this short squeeze is going to happen, and they might just be exiting around $30 or $40, and that would then lead to less upwards pressure, and it would be very difficult to actually get this thing to pump up past that point if a lot of people have been dissuaded. So it's really what's really important with this is you're going to have to be looking at, is there enough momentum and enough volume and enough people who have enough conviction in this stock? That's really what we're talking about here. Do people have enough conviction in this stock to just buy it and pump up the price and pay prices that are not at all justified fundamentally? We're really going to have to look at that to determine if this short squeeze is going to be possible, because as we said before in the chart, 94% of the short interest, 94% short interest on the free float. That's absolutely insane, and that could lead to a massive short squeeze. Once again, we would have to see a massive rise in price for that to happen. So that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you're interested, there is a Webull referral link that you can use to get 2 free stocks valued up to $2,300. That's a great deal. It's in the pinned comment. It's in the description. All you have to do is make an account to get the first free stock. You don't even have to deposit any money. But if you do deposit money, if you deposit, I think, $5, then you get another stock valued up to $2,000. So that's a great deal if you're interested. Other than that, have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.